Okay, so we started with this topic on checking the accuracy of data. I mean, this is a topic that we started yesterday, and we discussed what this topic is all about. What is data validation? And we also talked about certain validation rules. All right, namely, uh, yeah, the presence check to begin with. What is the presence check? What is the range check? And then there's another check linked to range check, which is a limit check. So what is the difference between the range check and the limit check? Type check. So these are the ones that we covered up yesterday. So I am going to move on from here for today. And the next check in line that we have to talk about, you can call it a validation check. We can also call it a validation rule. So either way, you can use both these terms. So length check is the next that we have to discuss. So as the name implies, this is a kind of a check that would ensure that the data which is being entered in a field is of the required length or is a certain number of characters. It consists of only a certain number of characters. So, what could be an example of a length check being used? Any example that comes to your mind? Very good. When entering passwords, all right. So we do know that usually when it comes to entering passwords, passwords are usually restricted in terms of their length. And usually, I think you will find that they say that the password must be, say, for instance, 8 characters long. So 8 characters means 8 characters, not 1 character more, not 1 character less. It must be exactly 8 characters. So, what is the validation rule or the validation check behind the scenes, which is checking for the number of characters? It is the length check. So, while the user enters uh, the data, the password, the number of characters would be counted, and if the number of characters is 8, it would be considered valid. It would not allow you to enter characters which are more than 8, so there's a restriction on that. But also, if the number of characters is less than 8, it would give you an error message, and it would ask you to put in at least 8 characters for the password to be valid. Okay, some of the examples that have been given here are, the password example. A password must be at least, say, for instance, 6 characters long. Yeah. A grade must be exactly 1 character. Grade such as, A grade, B grade. So if there's a field in which the grade is to be entered out of, say, for instance, grades from A to F, say, for instance, A, B, C, D, E, F. So every grade is only 1 character. So if the grade is to be mentioned, you do not require more than 1 characters for that. So 1 character would be sufficient. So maybe the length of the grade field could be set to 1 character so that the user is not allowed entering more than 1 characters, or for that matter, maybe less than 1 characters. The next example, a product code must be at least 4 characters and no more than 6 characters. So here you have an option where your product code may at least be 4 characters or a maximum of 6 characters. So it will not accept characters which are less than 4. It will not accept characters which are more than 6, but it will accept a product code which is either 4 characters long, 6 characters long, or 5 characters long. All right. So this is what the length check is about. Next, we move on to the format check. Okay, format check is also sometimes called picture check. Any idea, anyone, what a format check might be? What are formats? I mean, we say that something is in a certain format. What do we exactly mean by that? Yes. You can say that. That could be one way of saying it. Anyone else? You think you can come up with a different example? Yeah, example of a format check. Okay, date of birth. Very good. Yes. A specific pattern, you can say that. Well, date of birth could be a good example of a format check as well. How? Well, let me use a wide screen for that. So, say for instance, you know that dates can be written in different formats. We usually have I don't know if you know about it or not. We can either have a short date, we can have medium date formats, and dates may be even written in long date format. Short date, medium date, long date formats. Now, a short date would be a date that only has the day, month, and the year parts mentioned in numeric form. For example, if I write something like this, if I write D slash M and this is a short date format. And what does it suggest? That the day part of the date should be written as in digital form, I mean in the form of digits. So you're going to use 2 digits to represent the day part, 2 digits to represent the month part, and 4 digits to represent the year part. So say for instance, if it's a single digit date, what we can do is, instead of, say for instance, it's the 5th of some month. So instead of writing only 5, I will actually write 05. Yeah. If it is again a single digit month, say for instance it is the 6th month, then I will write 06 because it suggests that the day and the month are to be specified using 2 digits. So I will put in a 0 to make it 2 digits. If the month was 12, then of course I will write 12. And of course the years are to be written in 4 digit format. That is generally a standard all over the world now. You do not write a two digit year. You always write a 4 digit year. And actually there's a very important reason behind this. Why should we write 4 digit years? I don't know if anybody knows about it or not. We'll talk about it at some time. Right now is not the time to be talking about it, but I'll sort of mention it sometime. Why we write 4 digit years? Okay, medium date would be something like this. Uh, Say for instance, the date we are talking about is this. So if I have to write it in medium date format, it would be like 05 June 2023. So usually the month part would take the form of word the word month. Okay, जैसे आप लिख रहे हैं June, July, August, whatever, instead of writing it in numeric form. So this is like more of a medium date format. Next comes in the long date format. So a long date would be something like this. Um, Say for instance, today is what? Today is Thursday. And today is the 14th. So Tuesday, 14 September 2023. Now this is a long date where you mention the day in complete form, like as a word, then you mention it in numeric form, then the full form of month, and then the 4 digit year. So these are short, medium, and long date formats. Now within these formats as well, you might write these dates a little differently. For example, when it comes to the short date format, one thing which is important from the viewpoint of your course is that uh, different short date formats are considered a standard in different parts of the world. Such as if we talk about UK, United Kingdom. In UK, the short date format which is used is this DD, MM, but the US short date format is what? Exactly, very good. That would be month first, then day, and then the year part. Look at the date on my computer right now. Is this the US format or the UK format? The US format, right? Okay. Now, why am I talking about all this? Format lets me know the order in which the data is to be entered, and if that order or that format is not followed, the data would not be considered as valid. All right. And from the viewpoint of your course, why is it important to understand the short date UK and the short date US format? Well, there's a very simple reason for that. And that simple reason is that this OA level qualification is a UK based qualification. Okay. So you know that they would send some source data that you'll have to work with in your practical exam. Say for instance, if there's a database question or if there is some spreadsheet question, they would provide you with support files of the source data. Now, if in that data you have a field that is a date field, then you would notice that they would have included the dates in the short date UK format. Day first, then month, and then the year. So your system settings have to be compatible with the way the data is formatted or stored in the files for the sake of compatibility. We will realize this a little later practically. Even when we do these things, you'll realize why is it important to make sure that the format that the format for the date that your system has, it should be the same as the format given in the data that is being shared with you. Because if it is not, if there's no compatibility, then you may face difficulties in using the data which has been provided. So that we'll see practically when we come to that point. But for the time being, it is important that your system date is also set to the same format, which is the format supported by the data, or the format in which the data is available. So we would be using, whenever it comes to the short date format, we will be using the UK short date format. Okay. Anyway, so having said this, this is just one example of data being present in a certain format. Uh, can you think of any other example where data might be format specific? It relates to you in some way, actually. The other example that is coming to my mind. Yes. IDs. Okay. Yes. Account numbers, you can say that. Very much so. Actually, yes. But let's take a simpler example. Well, every center that has been registered as a Cambridge school has a center number allocated by Cambridge, yeah, which starts with the prefix PK, and then afterwards there is a numeric code. For example, I mean, hypothetically speaking, I'm not saying that this is the center number of any particular center, but how about PK242, say for instance, or 245, for example, PK245. Now, do you see a format being followed here? So in this center code or the center number, the first two characters are always letters, and the next three are numbers. It could be three or four. There's a format about it. The first two characters are specifying the country, and the next three digits are actually being used to uniquely identify a particular school or center. Yeah. So there is a format about it. How about flight codes? So PK 747, say for instance. And there could be other examples. So with flight codes as well, there's a format. So actually, formats can be used in a lot of areas. Product codes can have formats. Customer IDs can have formats. You just gave examples of credit card numbers can have formats. So basically, format wherever it is important to be used must be used. Let's see if we have similar examples here as well. So if you have a look at this, uh, so an email would have a format like this. So this is correct. There's a format about email. Even this would be correct. This would be correct. Yeah. Student ID must be 4 numbers followed by 2 letters. If the format is that a student ID must be 4 numbers followed by 2 letters, then can we consider this ID to be correct? Is this ID correct then? Yeah. Is this ID correct? How about this ID? Is this correct? No. Because the format suggests that the student ID should be 4 numbers followed by 2 letters. So this is what the format check is. Usually when you are typing data into the computer and a certain format is required, it is specified so that the user is guided about the format in which the data is to be entered. And if you do not follow the format, then of course the computer would produce an error message because there is a validation check or validation rule in place. Next is lookup check. A very simple check. Lookup checks work on predefined lists of data items. Lookup checks work on predefined lists of data items. For example, you're filling an online form for some purpose and you're supposed to mention the gender. Okay, so how can you have it? One way of taking the input for gender could be, say for instance, the field is gender. You might have a box in front that has a drop down button. When you click on it, you are shown 2 options. Yeah, and you have to pick one of the two. So instead of requiring the user to type it in, it can be given in the form of a pre-decided or predetermined list of options. Sorry? This is a drop down menu that I just made. When you click on this button, uh, a menu drops down. Okay, uh, this type of a menu is also called a pull down menu. The actual name is pull down menu. Okay, sort of it opens up in a pull down form. Okay, and to actually show all the options. Now you can just pick one of the options from there. So it's like a lookup table. It's like a lookup table from where you can look up for any data item that you want to select, look it up from there, select it, and that's how your input would be taken. Instead of requiring the user to, having to type it in. Remember, I was telling you one thing yesterday that why is data validation important, and in that context, we were talking about the fact that wherever it is possible to allow user to give inputs in the form of selections and stuff, it should be encouraged, because we should discourage typing in certain situations, because the more the typing, the more time consuming would it be, and more would be the chances of error. See, so it's a universal understanding that the more that you have to type, the more are the chances of error. So wherever you can avoid typing in your design of your programs, okay, or your screens where you are taking input from users, you must use those methods to reduce the amount of typing that is needed. So this could be one of the examples. Another example that has been given here is students taking a qualification would be issued grades such as pass, merit, and distinction. When inputting the data, a validation rule could check that only X, P, M, and D are entered, X would be considered here as fail. So for pass, it is P, for merit, it is M, for distinction, it is D, and X is if the student would have failed. So only these four options to choose from. One last option that comes to my mind, that we might have come across, I mean, you might have come across many times is when you have to select your country or your city. So there's a drop down menu given, you just click on it and a list of countries or cities is shown. You just pick up or choose the right one from the lookup values, and there you go. So that's how you can input your data. Having said this, a lookup check would mean that only and only a value given in the lookup list is a valid value. Anything that you would like to type otherwise would be considered invalid because there will not be a match for that data in the lookup table or in the list of predetermined options. So this is something that you must keep in your mind as well. Okay, the next check is consistency check. Now, this is a type of check that is a little different from the ones that we have discussed so far. How does a consistency check work? Actually, consistency check would work on the logic of certain data items in a certain way in terms of the way that they are related. It will check how certain data items are logically related with each other and in a certain context, and if they are not, then uh, the consistency check would look up for it. Now, what could be some of the examples? I think you will understand it better when I give you the example. So if you look at this, the first example, it says when entering the gender of M or F, a consistency check will prevent F from being entered if the title is Mr. and will prevent M from being entered if the title is Mrs. or Miss. Does it make sense? Does it make sense to everybody? Say for instance, we have a field title, okay, and we have a field gender. In the title field, you can only put in Mr. You can only put in Mr. in the title, and when if the gender is female, then you can either put in the title as Miss or Mrs. Now, where would the consistency check come into play? If the person has entered the title as Mr., then a valid gender here to be entered would be male. This is how these two are logically connected with each other and gives your data a certain kind of consistency in the way it is interpreted. Had this not been the case, for example, if in the title somebody would have typed in Mr., but in the gender field you type in this or this, then there's a consistency issue. These two do not logically relate. So here is where the consistency check would come into play. And if somebody makes a mistake like this, then it is the consistency check that would actually let you know that you have made a mistake, and certain data items that are somehow in a certain context logically related, uh, that rule is being violated. Okay, the logical connection is not there, so it would ask you to correct it so that they become logically related again. So this is what it is. This is what the consistency check would do. Okay. Another example that comes. By the way, can you think of another example of consistency check? What do you think? Yes. Hmm. The sizes of shoes. So wouldn't it be a case that you would only be given the size options that are applicable in that region? Why would you be given a size option that is not even applicable in that region? So yeah, but well, nonetheless, it was a good try. At least you came up with an example. Anybody else think about it? Okay, one more example that comes to my mind is in an order processing system. In an order processing system, what if we have an order date and an order due date or simply a due date? Do these two fields logically relate in any way? How? We do know that the order date is the date on which an order has been placed. And the due date is one when that particular order is due, due to be delivered. So there is a relation, of course, but in what context is there a relation? Where can we go wrong with this type of data? Somebody else. Somebody else. Where can we go wrong with this data? Order date and the order due date. Same day would not be wrong really, because what if the order is to be delivered on the same date? Exactly. You want to say the same thing? Okay, you can give your answer. Yeah, that's true, but that's more of a mathematical calculation. Okay? Well, in terms of data not making sense logically, that is what we are looking at. So in that, okay, yes, exactly, that is exactly what she said. Very good. In terms of its logical context, the due date has to be a date which could either be the same as the order date, or it should be a date later than the order date. Those are two possibilities which would be considered correct. That, say for instance, uh, let's write it down for better understanding. Today is what? Today is the 14th. So 14th September 2023. Now the order date could either be the same date, it could be the same date, yeah, or it could be a date later. But what the order due date cannot be would be a date before the order date itself. The order due date cannot be a date which is less than the order date itself. Can that happen? That cannot happen. So, in terms of the data being sensible, okay, this would not be considered as sensible data. This would not be considered logically correct. There would be a consistency issue. How can an order due date could be a date before the order date itself? So there's a consistency issue. So the consistency check would make sure that whatever order due date is being put into this particular field, okay, is a date which is either the same date as the order date or it is a date later. That would work. But if the user ends up entering a date, maybe accidentally, which is a date before the order date itself, or it is lesser than the order date itself, it would give you an error message. Hence, all along you would have noticed one thing, that all these checks are ensuring one thing, unanimously one thing, and that is that at the time of input, the data which is being input into the system is correct in every way. It is accurate, it is correct, logically it makes sense. All right, it is sensible. So this is what the purpose of all these validation rules is. You had a question?
So, sir, as compared to the other checks, this one is the most complex one to program because it uses more logic than
It is not complex to program at all, actually. Yeah, in terms of setting up this validation rule, it's fairly simple. All you need to do, in terms of an expression, if you were to check this, okay, what kind of a validation rule would you put into this field? Well, the validation rule that you would put in would be uh, order date is less than or equal to the due date. How simple is this to be put into the program? And it would check this. It will make sure that wherever this rule is violated, it will give an error message. Yeah? Makes sense? Very good. Okay.